So now we are going to do Hobbes. Okay. So basically these are all his PYQs. Okay. And in PYQs, what all is asked? Okay. State of nature. Okay. Then Hobbes absolutism. Okay. Then Hobbesian notion of political obligation. That is basically uh, what obligation state has towards the people. Okay. Like right to life. Okay. Then then here again state of nature. Okay. Then comment on the assertion of Lasset that Filmer and not Hobbes was the main antagonist of Locke. Okay, so this we will study when we study Locke. Okay, then covenants without sword. Basically, this is a criticism of John Baudin. Okay, then Hobbes as an individualist. Okay, then liberty or freedom, okay, signifies properly the absence of opposition in external impediments of motion. Okay, so his view on liberty and social contract. Okay, then again social contract. Okay, sovereign Hobbes relieved sovereignty completely from disabilities which Baudin had. So again his concept of sovereignty. Okay, so these five are the main topics, okay, which we are going to study. That is human nature and methodology. Hobbes used, okay. Then state of nature. hmm, Then his theory of sovereignty and law. Then individualism versus absolutism, okay. Then social contract and liberty, okay. Then these are the two introductions I have written, okay. So first one, if a question is asked on modern scientific and sovereignty angle, basically on social contract, okay, then on liberty, okay, then even if something is asked on state of nature, you can write this as well, okay. So Thomas Hobbes, father of modern political science, pioneered a resolutive compositive methodology, okay. This I will explain a bit later, okay. To establish the autonomy of politics, by grounding absolute sovereignty in individuals' right to life, he resolved Baudin's inconsistencies, okay, famously asserting that covenants without swords, that quote, okay, cannot secure human desires for power. Okay. Covenants basically means law. Covenants without swords basically means law without power. Okay. Then if a question is asked on individualist absolutist paradox of Hobbes, okay. So Hobbes remains political thought's most consistent thinker, okay, paradoxically synthesizing possessive individualism with absolutism. Okay. Through his pessimistic state of nature, he argues that the end of obedience is protection. Okay. His Leviathan means his book creates a secular protective state, establishing modern foundation of legal positivism and negative liberty. Okay. So any of the two intros you can write based on the question. And now we are going to learn about quick things in order to get a background check on Hobbes. Okay. So first his concern. So basically Hobbes survived the or was survived the two revolutions, or you can say two revolutions. The first was the Spanish Armada, okay, where Spain attacked England, okay, and the second was the Puritan Revolution, okay. So what was his main concern? So during these revolutions, okay, or during these attacks, the thing was that England and the other European states around were basically living in chaos, or what we call it as state of nature. Okay. So basically his concern was order and security, okay, and protection of life. Okay. So For this, he gave the right to life, okay, as the most important right, okay. It is an absolute right, okay. Basically, it is also right to self-preservation, okay. Then his books. So first was Leviathan, okay, or his only book, I think. I may be wrong about his book, but the name is this only, Leviathan, okay. So Oakeshott comments that comments on this book that Leviathan is perhaps the greatest and sole masterpiece of philosophy written in English literature. Okay, so this is what he comments. Then we are going to learn about his methodology. Okay, so what methodology he used. So the first one is resolutive compositive methodology. Okay, so this methodology of his was basically inspired by Galileo's principle of mechanics. Okay, principles of mechanics. So, what did Hobbes do was basically he applied these principles of mechanics for human psychology. Okay, so basically, what was his methodology? I will tell you very in short. Okay, using an analogy of a clock. Okay, so basically, first the step. Okay, resolutive step is that, so when you want to learn about a clock, okay, the clock as a whole, you have to understand how the complex mechanical clock works. Okay, so first have to dismantle it. Okay, so first we have to dismantle it. Okay, then dismantle it into the smallest gears and springs. Okay, dismantle into the smallest things. Okay, then for Hobbes, it means that you have to uh, break down, break the state down into its smallest unit. So, what was the smallest unit? So, what was the smallest unit of state? Individual. Okay. and individual or humans are guided by basic psychological motions of pleasure and pain. Okay, so he does this breakdown. Then the compositive step. Okay, so what is the compositive step? It means that basically once everything is dismantled, okay, you have to put it back together. But now you know how to reassemble them. Okay, so once you know how to reassemble them, then the clock starts getting in motion. Okay, so basically what Hobbes does is that he reassembles. Okay, he reassembles the man. Okay, but who here he reassembles? The selfish humans. Okay, so what he does is that he reassembles these selfish humans through the means of social contract. Okay, and once these humans are binded by the contract, they have to obey. Okay, and this also gives a desire for safety. Okay, to the others. Okay, and once everyone get together, okay, or assemble together, okay, then it creates absolute power of the state. Okay, so I hope you have understood the resolutive compositive methodology. Okay, then the second point, or the second methodology he used was psychology. So basically, according to Hobbes, okay, to understand politics, one must understand human behavior. Okay, then he is also a social contract. He's also of the social contract tradition. Okay, which means contractual origin of the state. Okay, then we are going to, in short, learn about his significance. Okay, so what was the significance of Hobbes? Okay, so first, he was the first person to give complete the complete theory of sovereignty. Okay, Then, according to Macpherson comments that Hobbes is the first to lay down the science of politics. Okay, then Hobbes, as a scholar of capitalist class. Okay, so these were few of his significances. Okay, then so first we'll decode that what was his complete theory of sovereignty. Okay, so for that we have to understand why Hobbes was the first. Okay, as why Hobbes was the first modern thinker. Okay, so Hobbes as first modern thinker. Okay, so Hobbes as a first modern thinker. Okay, so why Hobbes is called the first modern thinker? So first, because Jean Baudin, okay, Jean Baudin, okay. So what he did that he he was the first to attempt, okay, or the first to develop a theory of state sovereignty. Okay, first to attempt to develop the theory of state sovereignty. Okay, okay, and he defined sovereignty, but so he defined sovereignty, but basically he failed to overcome the medieval mentality, okay, and limited the scope of sovereignty to the secular sphere of life. Okay, then Hobbesian Leviathan. So basically, okay. So Hobbesian Leviathan, okay, gave a systematic theory, gave a systematic theory of sovereignty. Okay, So it is famously said that while Baudin was standing at the gates of modernity. Okay, comma, it was Hobbes who jumped inside the gate. Okay, who jumped inside the gate. Okay, you can use this in the intro as well. Then, so basically, what are the other reasons as well that Hobbes is called the first modern thinker? Okay, then his scientific methodology. Okay, that is his use of RC method, that is resolutive compositive method. Okay, then because he abandoned medieval scholasticism. Okay, then other reasons, secularism, that means complete divorce. Okay, between politics and religion. Okay, complete separation between politics and religion. Okay, then so basically for him, state's authority is better than divine will. Okay, then cons- contractual legitimacy, it means that Hobbes replaced the divine right of kings. Okay, with social contract. So basically, Baudin believed in the divine rights of the kings. Okay, then his methodological individualism. Okay, his individualism and legal positivism. Okay, his individualism basically means that he was the first to build a systematic political theory starting from the individual as unit of state. Okay, individual as unit of state. Okay, and so legal positivism basically means that the command of a definite sovereign authority, okay, backed by the power of enforcement. Okay, sovereign authority command backed by enforcement. So basically, it means that covenants without swords are but words. Okay. So now we are going to read about Hobbes as an individualist. Okay. So first, Where does the tradition of individualism origin from? Okay, so basically, individualism is that man being prior, man being prior to state. Okay, it means that, or sorry, its origin is in sophists. Okay, during Plato's era. Okay, so and a famous sophist thinker. Okay, which you can quote here was Glaucon. Okay, because he was also a social contractualist. Okay, his idea of justice was the interest of weak. Okay, then Sabine. So according to Sabine, Hobbes is the greatest of all individualists. Okay, why he says so? Because Hobbes was basically the first person to logically establish on the basis of RC method. Okay, why? Because first person to establish logically, okay, why humans are individualists in nature. Okay, using a proper scientific method. Okay, RC method. Okay, then what were his views on man? Okay, so basically, or before that, we so Hobbes was basically individualist in both sense. Okay, individualist in both sense, which means so basically Hobbes was individualist in methodology. Okay, why? Because Hobbes builds his political theory on individualistic nature of man. Okay, political theory on individualistic man. Okay, or nature of man, and the second, the second sense is basically normative. Okay, Hobbes believes that there is nothing wrong. Okay, nothing wrong in being individualist. Okay, then so first after this we are going to learn about, okay, Hobbes' view on man. Okay, views on man. Okay, so he had a very pessimistic view. Okay, of man, similar to Machiavelli. Okay, according to him, life of a man is a continuous and restless search for power continuous and restless search for power. Okay, after power, which seizeth, which seizeth upon, oh sorry, only after his death. Okay, so basically, man is always in continuous search of power. Only that search for power ends with his death. Okay, and according to him, man is hedonistic. Okay, man is hedonistic in nature. Hmm. So basically, which means that man is pleasure seeking. Okay, and he establishes this by the use of RC method. Okay, then he also thinks that man is a self-centered power seeker. Okay, egoistic. Okay, man is egoistic. Okay, then possessive, fearful. Okay, etc. etc. Okay, that is why he quotes that I and fear were born together. So basically, I will give you a little bit context of this quote by him. So he was born during the Spanish Armada, and it was basically a very violent overthrow in England. Okay, and especially after Spain attacked England, and that is why everyone was basically in a state of fear or state of nature in England due to the constant attacks, and that is why he quoted later that I and fear were born together. Okay, so man always fears. Okay, for his safety. Okay, for his life and his property. Okay, then due to this nature of man. Okay, due to the nature of unlimited desires and limited resources, it creates a state of anarchy. And this anarchy can only be controlled by giving absolute powers to the state. Okay. So now we are done with Hobbes as an individualist. Now we are going to read about Hobbes as the greatest of all absolutists. Okay. Sorry, before that, hmm, yes, sorry. So before that, sorry. So two, one, two, three, four, five. So Hobbes quotes that man is individualistic by nature and social by necessity. This view is similar to Aristotle's view. Okay, Zoon Politikon. Okay, you can link here Aristotle. Okay, then you can also say that Hobbes is a scholar of possessive individualism. So basically, it is a philosophy of capitalism. Okay, with this philosophy, you can also say that he is a scholar of the capitalist class. Okay, so basically, what possessive individualism means is that whatever man possesses is due to his efforts. Okay, and hence man cannot be compelled to give back to the society. Okay, yes. So with this Hobbes as an individualist over, then Hobbes as an absolutist. Okay, okay. After this, we'll read why there is a contradiction between them. So basically, Hobbes is described as the greatest of all absolutists. Okay, okay, because he gave, or he is the first to give the systematic and scientific justification, first to give a systematic and scientific justification of, sorry, for absolute sovereignty. Okay, okay. Then basically, what here absolute sovereignty means is absolute power to the state. Okay, so basically, absolutists are those who want to give absolute power to the state. Okay, absolute power means sovereignty. Okay, which means the state is not influenced by other externalities or internalities. Okay, state is sovereign. Okay, and basically he also asserts that state has monopoly over the use of coercive force on a territory. Okay, then he also quotes that or says that man has liberty only where the law is silent. Okay, It means that man is free to the extent state has permitted him to be free by not making the law. Okay. So basically, this is why he is called the greatest of all absolutist. Okay. Now, after this, we are going to read about why there is a contradiction between them. Okay. So now we are going to read about whether there is a contradiction. Okay. Is there a contradiction between Hobbes' individualism and absolutism? Okay. So is there a contradiction? Is the question. So first we are going to quote C.B. Macpherson, who comments that Hobbes starts as an individualist and concludes as an absolutist. Okay. Or you can also write or reframe it as Hobbes is individualist in his assumptions but absolutist in his conclusions. Okay. Then, so the question arises that is there a contradiction? Okay. So no, there is no contradiction between them. Okay. No contradiction in his theory. Hobbes is a consistent thinker. Okay. Hmm. So basically, there are two things. Okay. First is the individualist foundation. Okay, where Hobbes basically uses methodological individualism. Okay, so basically Hobbes uses methodological individualism. Okay, which means that he starts his theory. Okay, with the individual's psychological needs, specifically individuals' right to life and self-preservation. Okay, then so basically the state is uh, we can say is not a natural institution but rather an artificial creation built solely for the right to life and self and individuals right to self preservation. Okay, but he also gives the right to resist. Okay, So first, absolutist conclusion. So basically, because humans are fundamentally egoistic and power seeking, okay, Hobbes concludes that they can only live in peace if they surrender their rights to the absolute authority. Okay, so human nature is fickle minded, egoistic. Okay, so they, for peace, they give absolute authority. Okay, authority to the state. Okay, then so basically then the synthesis happens. So what is the synthesis? His absolutism is a derivative of his individualism. Okay, so basically individuals rationally choose to be ruled by a total power, okay, to escape the state of nature. Okay, this is proven by the fact that if sovereign fails to provide protection, the individuals have the right to resist. Okay, then if sovereign fails to protect, then individuals have the right to resist. Okay, right to resist the state. Why they have right to resist? Because the contract, the primary purpose of the contract, that was the protection of life, has been violated. Okay, so you can also write here one more thinker, Dune. Okay, so he thinks that Hobbes is an individualist and absolutist at the same time. Okay, then we'll quickly read about Hobbes' state of nature. Okay, so now the topic of Hobbes' individualism and absolutism and the contradiction between them is done. So now we'll quickly read about his state of nature. Okay, on state of nature. Okay, so now Hobbes Hobbes' views on state of nature. Okay, so basically, what is state of nature? It is Hobbes' concept that state of nature is a hypothetical condition used to describe human life. Okay, in absence of common power or laws. Okay, or social institutions. Okay, so it serves as a logical starting point for his social contract theory. Okay, justifying the need of an absolute sovereign. Okay, so his state of nature is basically justification of his concept of absolute sovereign. Okay, okay. So few quotes on state of nature. So according to Hobbes, state of nature is a state of war. Okay, of all. It is a state of war of all against all. Okay, then according to Hobbes, the state of nature is where the life of man is nasty, brutish, poor, and short. Okay, then in state of nature, according to him, there is no scope for art, literature, okay, then navigation, industry, etc. Okay, so what he wants to tell is that basically where there is no self-preservation, there is basically when there is no self-preservation or the right to self-preserve, you cannot, like you cannot go after or you cannot indulge yourself into art, literature, okay, and all other important things in life, okay, because your only goal is self-preservation, okay. Then he describes state of nature as a place there is where there is no common power, no law, then no justice, okay. So where there is no common power, there is no law, so there wouldn't be any justice there, okay. So basically it is the absence of morality and law, okay. And basically here force and fraud are the two cardinal virtues, okay. Then he gives three reasons for conflict, okay. Three reasons for conflicts. So the first being competition, okay. Competition for gains, okay. Then diffidence, that is fight for safety and glory, okay. Fight for reputation, okay. So these are the three things which are the reasons for conflict in state of nature, okay. And also in the state of nature there is no right, no notion of right or wrong. Okay, so there is no notion of right or wrong, and where there is no notion of right or wrong, justice and injustice relate to a man in a society and not in solitude. Okay, so basically he wants to tell that justice and injustice are a part of a society and not of or sorry of not a man in solitude. Okay, then uh, his critic evaluation or analysis, okay, on his state of nature. So first thing, Spinoza criticizes Hobbes by commenting that it is impossible for the monsters of Hobbes' state of nature to become law-abiding citizens of a civil society in the manner prescribed by Hobbes. By Hobbes. Okay. Then second one is C.E. Vaughan. So he comments that Leviathan is a useless book. Useless as a book of politics and fruitless as a book of history. Then here you can also add a value addition in IR. Okay, the IR link here you can use in GS. Sorry, PSR paper 2. Okay, is realist scholars like Hans Morgenthau, Hans Morgenthau argues that international relations is or modern international politics is essentially Hobbesian state of nature. Okay, you can use this as value addition. So this topic is done. Okay, so now we are going to read about theory of law. So basically, laws condition human behavior. Okay, condition human behavior. Okay, and these laws is what or are what lead to the smooth functioning functioning of the society. Okay, then basically there are many different traditions of law. Okay, traditions of laws. Okay, for example, first is natural law. Okay, which is based on reason. Okay, and Hobbes does not recognize it. Okay, then the second is religious law, which means it is based on book of religion. Okay, then customary law, based on any customs traditions. Okay, then next is positive law. So positive law, which means that basically laws made by state, okay, are called as positive laws. And according to Hobbes, laws in true sense originates from a definite common authority and comes with the power of enforcement. Okay, then also according to Hobbes, laws also according to Hobbes, law is is in its true sense is the command of the sovereign authority. Okay, in its true sense is command of the sovereign authority. Okay, then according to Hobbes, so basically, what does a state comprise of? Okay, what does a state comprise of? Okay, so state basically comprises of laws plus enforcement mechanisms, which are as bureaucrats, then plus punishment mechanism. Okay, so this is what basically is state. Okay, then you can also here link Aristotle. Okay, then he famously asserted that covenants without sword, yes, covenants without swords are nothing but words. So basically, this means that laws are ineffective unless there is a punishment mechanism to ensure compliance. Okay, laws ineffective if no punishment mechanism to ensure compliance. Okay, then so basically, in state of nature where there is no common law or no common power exists, there is no law and consequently no justice. Therefore, states' monopoly over the legitimate use of force is what gives laws the validity. Okay. Then Hobbes basically belongs to the school of legal positivism. Okay, which believes in state-made laws only. Okay, so basically, once the social contract is signed, okay, the sovereign codifies these or rules into positive law, which is mandatory and enforceable for all subjects. Okay, then we're going to do on about his views on liberty. Okay, so basically, Hobbes defines liberty. So how Hobbes defines liberty is liberty as silence of the law. Okay, so basically, an individual has the freedom to act only in those areas where the sovereign has not seen fit to create a law. Okay, you can also quote this that liberty is where law is silent. Okay, so basically, that is what I explained before. Okay, so according to him, liberty signifies properly the absence of signifies properly the absence of absolute authority of the state. Okay, which means that he has so basically what Hobbes prefers is that security over liberty. Okay, so Hobbes prefers this notion. Okay, liberty is understood in two forms. Okay, which is positive liberty and negative liberty. Okay, so first, negative liberty So what is negative liberty is basically the absence of state, okay, and this is the original concept of liberty, okay. Then the second concept is the positive liberty, okay. The concept of positive liberty, okay. So according to this concept, this concept came with the concept of welfare state, okay, which basically denotes that, so it basically denotes the capacity of the state to perform building functions, okay, building or development functions, okay. So this is the positive concept of liberty or positive liberty, okay. Why Hobbes is a proponent of negative liberty. Okay, so first we are going to give the definition of freedom according to Hobbes. Okay, or how Hobbes defines liberty. So according to Hobbes, liberty is basically, liberty is basically absence of opposition in external impediments to motion. Okay, so it basically means that just as water is free to flow until it hits, the wall of the container, okay, similarly a human is free until they encounter an external obstacle, which in the case of state is the law, okay. For humans it is the law, okay. So absence of opposition, okay, this is liberty in external impediments to motion, this is law, okay, basically. Then Hobbes gives another concept that liberty is where law is silent, okay. So for Hobbes, an individual has the freedom to act only on in those spheres, okay, where the sovereign has not seen fit to create a law, okay. So once, if a law is enacted, okay, it acts as an external impediment, okay. Then Hobbes basically gives priority to security over liberty, okay. So what this basically means is that, basically, for first, Hobbes has a very pessimistic view of human nature, okay, and that is why he thinks that state of nature is war, okay, of all against all, okay. So that is why, in order to escape the nasty and brutish life in the state of natures, individuals basically what they do is individuals surrender, okay, rationally choose to surrender their total natural liberty, okay, surrender their natural liberty, and this is by choice, okay, to the sovereign or to the absolute sovereign, okay. So once they have basically submitted. So basically, individuals surrender their natural liberty to the sovereign authority, okay, or to the absolute sovereign, okay, and then basically in exchange of protection and security from the state of nature, okay, and that absolute sovereign is his Leviathan, okay. Then relinquishment of rights. So basically, his concept of negative liberty is built on the fact that subjects have willingly relinquished their natural rights, okay, through a social contract, okay, and they only retain their right to life, okay. Hmm. And beyond that, liberty is basically what state permits, okay. They have also a right to resist if the state fails to, actualize the social contract, okay, or the state fails to implement the social contract, okay. Then why Hobbes does not support the concept of positive liberty? Hobbes does not support positive liberty. Why? Okay. So basically, what is positive liberty is basically the rule of state as a welfare state or capacity building state, which helps individuals achieve their full potential. Okay, but for Hobbes, okay, the state's only role regarding liberty is to provide security. Okay, is to provide security that allows for a peaceful living. Okay, then so I think with this the concept of liberty is done for Hobbes. Okay. Then after this we are going to read about his social contract. Okay. His views on social contract. Okay. So now we are going to study about Hobbes' views on social contract. So the first question arises is that why social contract is needed. Okay, and the basic reason is human nature. Okay, or how Hobbes described human nature. Okay, the pessimistic view about human nature. Okay, then basically it is also driven by the instinct for self-preservation. Okay, then so basically, what is a social contract? Okay, so it is a mutual contract. Okay, a mutual contract of all with all, and it is basically that individuals surrender all their natural rights. Okay, so basically it is a contract where individuals surrender all their natural rights except the right to life. Okay, and they surrender to who? To the absolute sovereign. Okay, why they surrender? For self-preservation. Okay, so the absolute sovereign here in his book is called Leviathan. Okay, which is the Leviathan. Okay, you can write here one point of positive that basically commented by Michael Oakeshott. Mikhail Oakeshott. Okay, who comments that Leviathan Son as the greatest, perhaps the sole masterpiece of English political philosophy. Of English political philosophy. Okay. Then, so basically, what what is the nature of sovereignty? What is the nature of sovereignty according to Hobbes? Okay, in a social contract. So it is basically absolute, indivisible power of the state. Okay. Crucially, the sovereign is the product of the contract, not a party to it. Okay, making the authority irrevocable. Then, then what is basically the or you can say the mechanistic view of state. So social contract is basically a mechanistic view of state. Okay, given by Hobbes. Okay, which is not like basically mechanistic view of state is in opposition to the natural or organic view to the organic view of the state. Okay, so who gave the organic view of the state? Aristotle and Plato. Okay, and mechanistic view is basically those who are the social contractualist. Okay, then basically he views state as an instrument, okay, of utility. Okay, so state is an institution institution of utility. Okay, which basically means that state's purpose is to increase joy or pleasure and decrease pain. Okay, so basically he uses the RC method, okay, to describe the institution of state. Okay, then or the role of the state. Okay, then here you can also comment or link the individualist absolutist link. Okay, you can also write here or you can link here. Okay, then you can also write this quote that I give up all my rights to this assembly or to this person, that is the state basically, on the conditions that all will give up their rights. Okay, so basically this tradition of social contract is basically based on capitalism. Okay, that means it is sorry if a economy is run in capitalism, it runs by contract. Okay, so societies are not natural. Basically, societies are artificial, and social contract is basically the interest of the weak. Okay, so you can link here sophist, thinker, Glaucon. Okay, then so I think with this, uh, Hobbes' views on social contract is over, and with this, the topic of Hobbes is also over. Or and before that, we are going to write few criticisms, and then the conclusions. Okay, so criticisms. So the criticism was that Hobbes gives only one-sided view one-sided view of human nature. Okay, so basically, why they think that he only gives one-sided view of human nature is that because during his time, the or the human nature he describes is too much influenced by the situations prevailing in England during his time. Okay, so basically he is the child of his time. Okay, you could have I could have used this phrase in Machiavelli also, but I forgot about it. Okay, so I have told you here, so I hope you change that in Machiavelli as well. Okay, or read it again there. Then basically the attempt by Hobbes to justify absolute authority of state. So basically, his social contract, okay, or his uh, individualism and absolutism is basically an attempt to justify the total authority of the or the absolute authority of state. Okay, so he wants the absolute authority of the state because of the human nature. Okay, so that is his criticism. Then a universal conclusion. So conclusions. So first, Karl Marx uh, has acknowledged Hobbes as father of all of us. Okay. Then you can also quote here Sabine, who comments that Hobbes' absolutism is a derivative of his individualism. So basically it is for the protection of individual, for the protection of individual and his right to life that Hobbes creates an absolute state. Okay, even when he creates an absolute state, he still gives individuals the right to protest or the right to resist in case of failure of the social contract. Okay, which basically means that state deprives the person from his right to life. Okay, so I think with this, Hobbes is over. Okay, you can write here one more conclusion. Sorry, Hobbes jumped inside the gate of modernity by grounding absolute sovereignty in radical individualism. His Leviathan is a mechanistic utility created solely to safeguard the right to life. Ultimately, his absolutism cre- his absolutism remains the most rational derivative of individual security. Okay. So with this, Hobbes has ended. Okay. Thank you.